Hey everyone, Joe Carroll here, and very happy to be with you guys today. And what I want to talk about today is a little bit of a return to our roots, a return to some of the basics of mixing. I know things have changed a lot over the years, right? I mean, used to people that did mixing for a living were professionals largely because that's the only people that had access to the tools, right? You had to go into a big studio and get your hands on a mixer, a multi-track tape machine, all the great outboard gear. And so those people were like the only ones that really had that skill set for the most part. When the DAW was introduced into our home studios, things changed radically for the better in many ways, and of course a lot of us could argue for the worse in some ways. Lately, some of the stuff I've seen is just, I mean, it's shocking. And what it amounts to is there's a whole lot of people teaching nowadays that shouldn't be. I mean, I think we could be honest about that. And that said, because more and more people are doing this and teaching this without some proper experience, they're teaching a lot of bad things. And sorry, I'm really not trying to be negative. I just really have a passion for this art and for this craft, and want to share what I was lucky enough to learn with you. If we'll look at the screen, this was the kind of stuff I was seeing. I mean, like all over the place. Digital EQ, like FabFilter, just like 12, 14 points of just madness going all over the place. This guy followed that with a multi-band, like a dynamic, whether it's a dynamic EQ, dynamic compressor, whatever. And I bet he had about 8 points going on that. And then he followed it with another EQ like this. And a lot of it was just doing the opposite of what he had just done in the one before. He's like, okay, so all this work that I've done earlier to brighten it up, now I think it's too bright, so I'm just going to put another EQ on it. That's not cool. That is not a proper use of our tools. That is not the right way to do this craft. And so because it's getting so watered down, I want to share with you a return to the basics, because a lot of our heroes, what made them great was the fact that they had to go from room to room to room to room, and they had to be great on all kinds of analog consoles, all kinds of outboard. They just had to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And I had a situation like that just last week. One thing that happened the other day when I was mixing on that analog desk is remembering how good a clean signal path can sound without a lot of nonsense that we have to have built into a template, or we would never be able to recreate it. So we're not becoming good engineers. We're becoming good template managers, and that's not cool. That's just not cool. So what I've got today is I've got this song pulled up, and we'll look at the screen, and you'll see one plugin. And I'm going to use the SSL 4000 for the plugin. So it's going to be like I walk into a studio and I sit down at an SSL 4K desk and just start going. And so we can move fast, and we can move in broad strokes with just a 4-band EQ, filters, and maybe a dynamic or a gate if we want it, but we don't even have to use that. There's a lot of channels where maybe the only thing I do is high pass filter it. I mean, there's nothing wrong. We don't need 6 or 8 plugins on every track. All right. So you'll see that's on every fader here. On the master bus, I'm using the Slate VMR virtual channel strip, and I'm getting a little, you can see here, Brit 4KE, a little saturation there to simulate mixing on an analog console. Followed by a stereo bus compressor. Again, these are all tools that would have been on the console, so this isn't I'm trying to be very streamlined and uncomplicated, just like we walked into an analog studio and tried to get busy. But it's in bypass, right? And then just some metering, because our analog console, the meters used to be right in front of us. And that was a great thing because we needed to know how hard we were hitting individual channels, buses, stereo bus. And then what did we do? We printed to tape. But at a certain spot, we started printing to digital, like DAT and things like that. So we may or may not use this, but I'm just trying to simulate classic, easy, set it and just roll with it, minor template, as if there wasn't a template. Okay, now we walk into a studio and they're going to have some form of effects. A lot of studios back in the day had a Lexicon 480, so I've brought up a plate patch there, the A plate, but it's in its default state. A lot of them had one alternative, like a PCM 70, PCM 60, PCM 80, whatever. So I've got the PCM 60 going right here in its default state, and I have an RMX 16. So 3 reverbs total. Okay, then a lot of studios would have had a couple delays. So we have a tape delay as well as a digital delay based on a PCM 42. As we need to throughout the day, most studios had a couple 1176s. They had maybe a DBX 160 or two. They had an an LA 3A. A lot of times two of them. That was kind of the common, and an LA 2A, and maybe one or two nice outboard EQs, and you could patch it where you wanted it, and that was it. So we're gonna limit our tools. I think that's great for us sometimes when we're practicing to become better at this craft. Is use a limited toolbox to just kind of work on our skills of listening and our skills of EQing and balancing. So what we would do, a good engineer would do, is start moving up faders, and a lot of times you start with the kick drum. And I've got this really cool song today, and you'll hear it as we develop, by my friend Phil French. Phil is an amazing saxophone player, so this is kind of an instrumental based thing. I didn't want to deal with vocals. I just kind of wanted to think about instruments and balances, and so the lead instrument is a saxophone. My buddy Phil French, look him up. So what we'll do is we'll start bringing these up, and there's two kicks. There's the real kick and the sample. And what we'll do is now it's on my desk, you can't see it, but I would be looking at the console meters if it was an actual console. But again, this is good practice even in the box. Gain staging is still a thing. So I'm going to start moving up the kick drum, and we're going to go to a louder point in the song. It looks like right here is a chorus. And let's just let the kicks play and try to get it to around -6, -7. Okay, so our peaks are just a little under. I'm gonna turn it up just a little bit more, but I want to keep my headroom, because as we EQ and compress and things like that, things get more exciting. They get more, they get a little louder. So I'm going to start with headroom, but I would have been looking at the stereo bus meters on the console to be hitting around -6 as my peak, as my very top, because it's just the kick drum. So, but that gives me a good foundation to start building on, to where I'm in a sweet spot of analog or analog flavored EQs. Okay. I'm sorry, analog flavored plugins. All right, here we go. You can hear there is a snare sample. This is a modern jazz production, and he's a modern jazz artist. And a lot of modern jazz that's instrumental based has loops or drum machines, various things like that as the drums. They're not real acoustic drums. He wanted real acoustic drums, but he still wanted that modern feel. So in addition to some loops and things, the kick and the snare are sampled, so it's a little more consistent, and it sounds a little bit more like a blend between acoustic drums and a modern, like, loopy based kind of thing. Okay, here we go. And I'm gonna pan based on drummer's perspective, because I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. You do whichever is right for you. But for me, most people that care, and the only people that care, I think, are mostly drummers, and they like to feel like they're sitting down at the kit playing, so they want to hear the toms go from high to low, left to right. Let's find a tom fill and get those set. Okay, I can see my meters, and I'm getting up to around -3 or so with the drums and the bass, and that is most of our headroom is eaten up by those items. So we're in a pretty good spot. Let's start adding in some of the other main instruments. I think piano and B3 are kind of playing throughout. Electric piano. By default, everything is in mono or full stereo, and we can work on panning as we go. There's 2 electric guitar parts. Let's see. So let's decide how far in the stereo field to pan them. Before we put the lead instrument on, we're going to add the electronic elements in there. So we've got looks like we have a loop playing. And let's turn all the way down. Okay, let's just start bringing it up and decide kind of, again, to me, the first 5 minutes of a mix, when you're setting your levels and you're panning, a lot of that goes all the way to the end of the record. So the first 5 minutes are pretty important to me. We have a conga loop here. Well, hit the wrong button. Okay, quite a bit of room sound built into it, but pretty mono based. Okay, cool. Now we have a shaker that's playing at the same time as the loop. So what we'll do, it looks like a lot of this song is on the hat to me, as opposed to the ride cymbal. There's a ride cymbal. Okay, so because I'm doing drummer's perspective and the hat is leaning a little to the left in the overheads, as well as obviously the dry signal too, I'm going to put the shaker, I'm going to lean it off to this one side just a little bit at least. What else do we have here? Okay, so we have a tambourine that comes in for the last part of it. Okay. I may leave that in the middle because I don't want it to blur the hi-hat. Now we have some claps and some 808s. Let's see what the 808s are doing. Okay, so we have 2 kicks, basically, followed by the big boom. Okay, so let's just put them on. That cymbal crash must be built into the loop. Yeah, I did not make the loops. They came in with fill as part of the already, pre-production elements. We have claps that play every other 2, 3, let's see, on beat 2 of every bar. Okay. Feels pretty good. Okay, let's look at where we are hitting our stereo bus now. Because, again, we would have been paying attention to metering. I know a lot of times we don't nowadays, but I think we should a little bit. So let's see if we're in a good spot. And especially if you are aspiring to start building your own outboard collection, gain staging matters. I mean, it matters a lot. So if you're ever thinking, man, one of these days I want to save up and I'm going to get a real SSL bus compressor and some Pultecs or something like that, and I'm going to have my outboard bus, you better believe this is an important part of it. So it's just, even if you're completely in the box right now, just start thinking this way. Look how magically that happens. By paying attention from the beginning to our kick drum, all of a sudden our stereo bus is in a perfect spot where we're almost touching analog zero. And we haven't worked on any kind of anything to make the track bigger sounding than it currently is at its raw state. And we haven't added the lead element, which would be our lead vocal, or in this case, saxophone, and which is going to put it into the red a little bit, which is a great place to be on most all analog gear. Most analog gear sounds its best when it's pushed a little beyond it at the zero level. So let's just put fill in there now, and let's kind of see where we're setting. So I could see right there it was jumping over zero sometimes when he's really, really going in. But we haven't used any compression or anything yet. Okay, so that said, I think we're in a great spot, and that was how we would begin our mix. And I still think it's how we should begin our mix. Just kind of just reassessing pans, reassessing balances, and just getting it to a spot where in its raw state it sounds great, just like this. All right. The next thing you'll notice on our mixer is this row right here, and that's our aux sends. So when we sat down on an analog console, they had aux sends. So it was real easy to send reverb to anything we wanted. We didn't have to create a knob. This is where templates come in handy to offset the fact that even though DAWs have so much capability, in their raw form, they have, it's terrible. So we do have to set up a template that makes sense, to where we can move in an artistic, creative way without thinking about technical. And that's what a template allows us to do. So it's in its raw form. We have 5 here to take care of our 5 effects processors that we have going. Okay. Now that is about, I think, all, and you'll notice it's on every track except for our stereo bus and on our aux returns. So here's another fun thing we would do on an analog console. That we should still do in the box now, is we would return our analog, our outboard reverbs and effects to channels on the console, so we could EQ them, we could adjust the levels, and if it was an automated console, whether VCA or moving, we could change that. I mean, there was a lot of benefit to being able to EQ our reverb returns. But another cool thing is because they were coming to channel strips, we had those same aux return, or those same aux sends that were on our kick drum or on our snare drum were on our returns. And so we could feed our reverb a delay into a reverb, or a reverb into another reverb, whatever the case we wanted to do. And that's still a powerful, powerful part of mixing now for the depth that we're trying to create. All right. Okay. So I hope this is, I've tried to go kind of slow so everyone can get their head wrapped around what we're doing, because I know people of all different experience levels are trying to watch this. That said, I think it's a great time to start taking off. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus kind of on the big picture and think about what we're trying to achieve out of this mix. And I'll just go right here to the top of verse 1. Okay, I'm hearing that 80s, 90s New York type of sound where it was kind of tight, so not as much sustain and size as we try to create now in a lot of modern rock elements. And that's a big part of mixing right there, is knowing different styles of genres, different styles of music, different eras, and because sometimes you're being asked to recreate 70s, 80s. Sometimes they're expecting the very, very modern current radio thing. If we're going to be a well-balanced balancing engineer, we need to know all of that stuff and do our homework, while we're practicing like this, so that we can do a great job when money is actually on the table and changing hands, or we're trying to make our own music as great as we can. So let's start with our kick drums. Remember, we have 2. Okay, so the real drum obviously was really thuddy, warm, round, and not a lot of attack, so we added a sample in to get our attack and some consistency. So let's just start kind of dealing with that. So let's pull this guy up right here. We're going to thin that out. Right there, we're going to thin that out. Let's add a little point just to where we know where it's at in case the other drum doesn't provide us everything we want. That's a pretty good spot. Okay, so high pass and low pass filters, one of our absolute very, very best friend. What I would do most of the time on the kick drum is set it to around 30. We can use the low pass filter if we want to. I mean, obviously there's nothing 15K or 20K that we want, but that's not crucial. I don't think we need to use the gate. I think all we need is that little bit of EQ, because I do hear the snare drum bleeding in there, but it's not enough to cause us problems. And that's another great part of mixing, is not to fight battles that aren't fighting you back. If it's not a problem, don't fix it. Don't waste your time. Focus on the stuff that needs focused on, that needs our attention. Okay, I'm going to get rid of a little slappy head sound. Around there. Let's find out where the attack is. So it's really around 3K, kind of that hit you in the chest kind of attack. And if we wanted to add some brightness to it, that SSL kind of 8K thing that they do so well, on an SSL 4K, the 8K is straight up and down. And that was a really powerful spot to leave that band a lot. Let's put the two together and see where we stand. Tons of bottom end, like it's thick. We definitely don't need any bottom end. So I'm gonna turn this attack off, the clicky attack from the sample. Okay, and let's put it back in the track here. And let's mute our saxophone, our lead instrument. That kick drum is now big and punchy. Let's check out our snare drum. Okay, I'm going to try, even though we're in the era of samples, and there are even forms of music, love it or hate it, where the sample is the most predominant thing, if it's not the only thing. Fills sound like machine guns. Every hit sounds exactly the same. And in other forms of organic music, that's not cool. Maybe we use the sample to a point. You still need to hear, if they go da 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 da, you need to hear the pitch difference between da 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 da, right? We need that real drum energy and dynamic. The differences are a good thing in pitch and volume. So we can add the sample in for consistency and a modern sound, but still get all the benefits of the real drum too. I think that's a really good place for the attack. Now let's add a little shine. We're going to bring our high pass filter up to around 80 cycles. I don't think I'm going to do anything else. Oh, I'm sorry. I was needing the snare bottom. Okay, we definitely want some of that snap. Okay, so we're going to take that up to around 82. One thing to note is that bottom end from a bottom mic on the snare drum is a thing. I know, again, something some people do is just wipe that up way up here to 300 or 500 cycles or whatever, but that does thin out the body of your snare drum. So just leave it. It's not causing you any harm. It's just reinforced. There is some bottom in there that is a good thing. I'm also hearing the kick drum bleed into the microphone. So we are going to use the gate. Let's set it to about 10 dB of reduction. One great thing about working on an analog desk like an SSL or a plug-in version of it, or any other channel strip, that's all the tools that we need in so many instances are right there at our fingertips. Let's test a little bit of a point coming from. Let's set it to about 3 to 1, fastest release possible, and let's get a little compression too. We can turn it down. Usually you would do that on the fader here, but this on the SSL plugin, it actually has a sound. So I'm going to do the digital trim. Now let's put that with the real snare drum and bring it up to level to where we get a little life and a little snap. Nice. Okay, now we can get that snare drum sample going. Let's see what it needs, if anything. Maybe just a little top end. I'm going to cut everything below 80 out. I'm a big believer in high pass filters. I think they're extremely important. All right, we've made a massive difference in the sound of the drums already. One tool, just like we're sitting down at a console and quickly turning. If I wasn't talking so much, we could do this. We could do this in dramatically less time. Okay, here are the overheads. I'm going to cut out just a little of that. Now we're going to add some air. You see, I'm just leaving it at the SSL stock 8K, you know, being at the top. Just such a great tool. Let's get some compression going. And let's set it to about 3:1, fastest release possible at the moment. Oh, and fast attack, fast attack. Before and after. Okay, now let's put it in the mix. And let's find a spot where he plays a crash cymbal and make sure we're loving it. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely got quite a bit of top end, but this form of music, I feel like that's appropriate. Okay, just making sure delay compensation is turned on so I don't paint myself into a corner with problems. The hi-hat filter, I am going to take it up to 150 or so. And I'm going to get rid of some extra body woofy thing that just from a close mic proximity effect. Right there. We're just going to reduce it a touch. Now let's put it with the overheads because it's, you know, a hi-hat bleeds into the overheads very strongly. So it's not what the hi-hat sounds like on its own. It's how does it sound with the overheads as part of the picture, because that's what the audience is going to hear. It does. It needs more articulation. No, I don't want that band. Let's work on the toms just for a moment. Here we go. And they've already been cleaned up. Okay. All right. Do I have loop playback going? I do. Okay, so let's dial in something. Right around 700 cycles there is where there's always going to be almost always going to be a nasty, unfocused flap sound that I call it on tom-toms for the most part. Find that and reduce it, and instantly our sound is much more focused. We have the fundamental note and the attack much more defined than we did beforehand. Okay, now let's add some bottom end. going to use the black. Let's find some little crispy attack. And some air. Cut everything below, 75, 80 cycles out. Let's go not fast attack. Let's use the 30 millisecond stock. And let's go 4-to-1. Fastest release possible. And see what the tom sounds like with some compression. Okay, the attack got more prominent. So we may even want to turn these down a little bit now. Before and after. Significantly better. And I've already checked, all these are in phase. Checking polarity is part of mixing, but I did that in advance just to make sure we could roll faster here, because this video is going to be a little lengthy anyway. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to copy those settings over. Something we couldn't do on an analog console, but we can now. But I'm just going to zero it out, but leave the frequency selected. And then I'm going to find this. Right there, that's the ugly head resonance. It's a dark tom. And I'm not going to worry about that extra cymbal leakage. It sounds like these are condenser mics, because the leakage that's coming in is kind of pretty. It's not that dynamic off color, off axis, nasty thing. So I think we're good to just leave it. Again, I'm only going to deal with problems if it's really a problem. If when I put everything in, it's not ruffling my feathers the wrong way, I'm not gonna fight the battle. Okay, our bass. What I'm hearing is a little bit. It's kind of overly round. We need some definition, and we need some tightness to the tone. Right around 200. The bottom end is great. I don't think I need to add anything. I just need to get rid of some of the mud above the real heart of the tone to make that tone more apparent. Let's get some growl. And let's chop everything out above like 7K. And let's set the high pass filter to around 50. Okay, now we've got a couple things to think about here. Remember I said, we're kind of trying to simulate working with a limited tool set. We're a room that's got an analog console and a handful of goodies. LA2A is always a great tool on bass guitar, but I don't feel like the tempo of this song and the punchiness of it is maybe the right choice. So I think we're going to use the 1176. Let's start there. And I've already used one of my 1176s in the rack. I got to remember that. Let's set it for the good old 10 and 2 setting, 4-to-1. See what that's doing in the mix. Not too bad. I feel like the drums are getting a little loud now, just a tiny bit. I may take a little top in. Out of the snare drum. It's always as you add things in and work on them, you work on this and it changes how this feels. So you just go back and deal with it. The piano is dark to me, very full, I should say. maybe around 300. Try to find a place where he's playing a little more consistent. Let's definitely set that to around 100 cycles or so. We don't need any information that's below that. Okay, we don't want it overly stifled, but I have two LA3As in my virtual rack behind me. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring in an LA3A, and I need to make that inactive because I've already used both of them that are in my rack. And let's work on getting a couple dB of dynamic control. And let's try to gain stage it to where without the compressor, post compressor, our makeup gain is kind of accurate. Our levels haven't dropped or gained too much. And what we will do, you know what? This is multi-channel. I want to go multi-mono 3A because I want them to act accordingly. Unlink them now. I feel like full width is okay. I don't really feel like the width is overly astonishing. Now I'm still hearing more of the frequencies that are bothering me. Maybe we need to be a little brighter. 6K, 7K on a piano is really a nice spot for some attack. We're EQing into our compressor. Much better. Okay, not much to do. That's another part of learning how to be a good mixer. Is not, I've mentioned a few times, not fighting battles that you don't need to fight, knowing when a track needs nothing, and that's what I'm hearing on this. The Rhodes is great. Let's just turn this up to about 100 cycles and maybe dip just a little bit of mid-range, low mids. Right there. Let's try see what the B3 is doing when he's really digging in. Let's find some. Okay, what we'll do, because the B3 is such a big part of this kind of music, it's not just a pad that is supposed to be hardly noticed like in some pop music and rock music. In jazz or R&B, blues, things like that, it is a more predominant thing. So we're going to actually add a little cut. And what you'll find, a lot of times the cut on a B3 is right in what is like a honky mid-range in a lot of other instruments. Yeah, let's go up around 3. We have a low mic, so we're going to cut the low out of we're going to use the high-pass filter on the top mics, the stereo top mics. And there's really not a lot of real top end in a Leslie cabinet, so we're going to cut everything below, I don't know, 12K, something like that, out just to keep our top end a little nice and ungrainy. So you add that bottom end, add that bottom mic in, you get your low end. And on my low end mic, what I generally did is just high pass filter or low pass, low pass, like as much as possible, because there's nothing up there we want at all. And I'll take this up to around 50 or 60 and just call it done. Coming together. At this point, a lot of times I might start turning on my bus compressor and kind of see how I can get the attack either under control or enhanced, that kind of a thing, glue the mix together a little bit. And all these, everything I brought in its stock state. So on a song like this, I'm probably going to start at 30 with automatic, and then I'll also test the fastest release ratio, probably just 2 to 1. I'm not gonna really abuse anything like this. We're gonna set our high pass filter to around 80 cycles or so, and be done. Barely gonna tickle it. That's fine right there. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to go into those electric guitars and kind of suss those out just a little bit. You can see that its levels are really static in a good way, but it still seems a little spiky. But because the saxophone is going to be right in the middle, I think it's nice that there'll be a little something over here with one electric, something over in that speaker with one electric, kind of creating some interest and stuff between saxophone notes. High pass filter up to 100. Low pass filter up to around 12K or so. There's just nothing above that on a guitar that we need. Let's do this. Let's set 3 to 1, fast attack, fast release, and just get that light flickering just a little bit to set the spikiness down in the track. See, we're just barely feathering it, but it's making a difference for sure. And I'm hearing a little low end that we need to trim out of it. Right there. Let's cut that just a little bit. This guy, we'll do the same thing up to around 100. 12K. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing. 3 to 1. Fastest release, fast attack. And let's feather it just a little bit. You see that 3 light flickering just a touch. That was a very common trick on SSL consoles. This thing has a little bit of low mid too. Let's just barely tuck it in. I'm not trying to get rid of the body. I just want to see if it'll all hold hands just a little nicer once it's all together. So it needs just a little more compression. The other thing we could do is find that frequency and dip it a little bit. Let's turn the compressor off because we're pushing into the compressor. Let's just duck that just a little bit. And the only reason I'm doing that is because I don't want it to take anything away from Phil's lead instrument there. I'm just trying to get it, to set in a comfortable spot where it's great. It's playing its role, playing its part, but not interfering with anything. Okay. I think we're rolling right along in a really good way. Do I need to do anything? I don't. So let's just, there's no low end in this loop. Let's use a high pass filter and call it done. I might play with fast attack compressor, like 5 to 1 or something like that. Fastest release. Just see if we can take the transient into a little bit better spot. There's not going to be anything on a shaker down in the basement that we need. Although when you actually bring up a graph on almost any instrument, vocals and stuff, there's a lot, if you used a real microphone to capture the source, a real preamp, various things like that, there's always subharmonics going on, and we don't need those in our mix. So let's just chop them out. I'm going to darken it just a touch to where it feels, we want it, we want that, again, we were talking about that kind of that New York kind of thing. I don't want it to be too round, but at the same time, I don't want it to jump out too much either. So let's just turn down the low pass filter until it feels like it's in a sweet spot. Pretty good. Feels pretty good to me. All right, we have a triangle, which I don't even think we've heard yet. Perfect. That will balance out our shaker that's leaning to the right. We can make this guy go left a little bit. Same thing. There's no low frequencies we want off of this guy. Let's try to do no other processing and see if that's all we need. All right, now let's see here. We got a tambourine. The percussion elements in this style of music are important, so they definitely need to be heard. And we're going to do the same thing, cut out all the bottom end. Let's get the hand clap going. And the 808s, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to park them at the right level, and that's going to be it. Okay. Okay, my instinct on that clap is to brighten it up, but we got to remember it's going along with the snare drum for most of the song. Let's hear how that's fitting. Pretty well. We'll bring just a touch of attack to it. Not really attack as much as presence. Cut out all the low end. The sub lows, I should say. Now, what we could do, remember in our rack, we have an equalizer. So we are going to patch in our Pultecs that are virtually behind us, and we have two of them for the stereo bus. So let's do that. Let's do that classic Pultec thing. This song has a rich low end already, so I'm not going to go too extreme, but I'm going to set it to 30 because Pultecs are so broad stroke that that's really affecting the kick drum area. And we're going to go to boost just a little bit up at around 12K. We're going to take our bandwidth max, and let's just kind of see what we are accomplishing. Okay, so what I can do as a result is the bass guitar sounds great now, but the kick is a little too heavy. So that kick drum, we're going to turn it down just a little bit. Turn our bus compressor back on, and we may have to change it just a little. And I'm looking here, and my peaks are just above -6. It's such a beautiful, beautiful spot. Okay, now I do have, remember, I have 160s in my rack. I may, on this tambourine, patch in my 160, and where's that guy at? I may try to eliminate that spike just a little bit more because 160s are pretty fast. Get rid of that spike just a little bit. We've just got a lot of shaky shake going on, so maybe that's not the right call. Maybe I just have just a touch of too much of this shaker. Okay, now remember we have our virtual effects rack over here. So let's go to the snare. Even though I'm kind of going for that New York tight thing, I am going to put some ambience on it. I don't think I'm going to use the drum rooms at all. Maybe a touch, but I think we're going to go for this tight thing and just use the PCM 60. We're going to go over here to our PCM 60, and this is the Plug-in Alliance Better Maker BM 60. And we're going to go to room. We're going to go to the next to smallest setting. We're going to turn our mix knob all the way up because this is an aux return. I think I may want the shortest time. I'm torn. Let's go to a smaller room. Or let's try a larger room with a shorter decay. That's part of the magic of some of this stuff is balancing the size of the room versus the reverb time, because the size of the room has a big effect on how 1 second of decay time, for example, feels. That feels pretty good. Large room with the shortest decay time. Let's just start there. Yeah, it's adding some life to it. Yeah, you just hear just a little bit of air around the room now. Let's try the toms, the same thing. And this is verb 2. That was way too much. Okay, let's put a little bit there as well. Still too much, still too much. Definitely want this plate on our B3. What is our default set to? 2 seconds. That's not a bad spot. Let's add a little bit of pre-delay. Let's just kind of start somewhere around 40 milliseconds. Not bad. Do a little bit less in the mix though. Okay, let's add some of that plate to our piano. Okay, now we're going to create some width with our delays. And so on the electric guitar, That's our tape delay, which is set to 15 IPS, I believe. Let me just show you what we got going on here. That our tape delay is set to 15 IPS, as you can tell by the 133 right here. And our other delay is the PCM42 set to eighth notes at this tempo, which is 88. And you'll see I'm going to pan it a little bit to the opposite side of this guitar. Let's do the same thing with this guy, the long delay. And see if that little bit of back and forth between them creates a little bit of imaging depth. Oh, I still got this guy on. I thought that's way too much. All right, so we're going to take him out of the tape slap and have him just in the eighth note digital. The claps, I'm debating whether or not to keep him bone dry or add a little bit of, I kind of like the, that R&B super dry thing, but at the same time, we do have this short room. Let's add just a tiny bit of that. Okay, we're in a pretty good spot right now. And we still have tools unused, but that's okay because we have our primary instrument start coming into the fold here. When I think of that New York jazz thing, I think of the saxophones, having a definite airy shine to it. Let's cut out everything below around 100. Okay, let's try a little bit of the channel strip compressor on the SSL and just kind of see what that does to keep him in a spot. Let's see what that's going to do, and let's combine that with, let's see, our 3As are gone. We still have 176, and we have a LA2A. Let's see what that does. Reduce that high end just a little bit, just a tiny bit. Now let's go ahead and start putting some effects on him. So we have our tape slap. And let's add that longer eighth note stereo. Remember how we were talking about one of the cool things about mixing on an analog desk is it was so easy to EQ our returns, and I'm hearing that digital delay being kind of bright. So I'm going to the 4K channel strip that would be on that channel. I'm just going to darken it. We don't need anything around probably under about 300 at all. fact, what I do is I go into all my reverbs and get rid of all the low end, because you just don't need it. It kind of clouds up the mix a lot of times. If I'm looking for the low end, I treat it that way. But by default, I'm cutting out all the extreme low end. What do we have? We have this RMX. Let's try. I think it's on its default ambience patch. Yeah, and let's trim that down to about 2.5 seconds. See what we got. Now let's contrast that to this is the 460 I'm sorry, the 480 A plate. Definitely a lot more sizzly. So I'm going to actually take that down too. So which one do we use, or do we blend them? Let's start here in the mix. Okay, so the 2A, I love the tone, but it is a little spiky because they're slow. I mean, that's just what they do. I'm going to try an 1176 because I still have one left. And wow, the gain staging is all off, isn't it? All right, let's try this. Let's try the 10 and 2 setting and just go from there. Feels pretty smooth right there. Nice. I'm going to go a little less 80s, 90s reverb level, and I'm going to turn the reverb down a little. Okay, so in summary, what we accomplished today is a really solid mix that, with some automation and a little more time tweaking here and there to perfection, we would be able to submit this to the client. He would be delighted with it, and we would get paid on to the next job. And just like our heroes, Bob Clearmountain, Chuck Ainley, Chris Lord Alge, Michael Brower, all the people that came before us that we still aspire to be like. We listen to, the records of gosh, you name it, that either any of those guys performed. And there's just something magical about them that we still chase. And I think it's very often because most of our friends that didn't grow up under the right tutelage are over processing and making everything so sterile that there's not a lot of life left. Like I said, I started this show by talking about a tutorial where a guy was teaching, and he had to be using at least, between all that was going on, at least 35 points of equalization, which is insanity. Our heroes that we were just mentioning could, with 4 bands of EQ, turn out the best work that we've ever heard, and still can. And we should be able to do that too. We should have that same skill set. We shouldn't rely on a template with tons of tools, to get to the end result. If we're going to be good engineers, good at this craft, and not only do great on our own, but teach it to the next generation, we should be able to use a couple bands of EQ and I'll be off to the races and turn in a product that is finished sounding. It sounds like a record. The people be like, I don't know how they did it, but it sounds great. Sounds way better than what I sent to them. That's our job as mix engineers, as balancing engineers. So every once in a while, I feel like it's good to just open up a blank template and start from scratch and just kind of challenge ourselves with a limited tool set to be able to turn in a great mix. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. We'll come back and we're going to do more of this kind of stuff, analog console inspired mixing, and some it maybe will inspire you to do some things in your own template and have a good time. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Happy mixing.